thank you so much for coming, and thanks again to the Theosophical Society for hosting this concert. This is a very special program for me, and because it brings the music of someone who I respect an awful lot into a space where this other major work can be appreciated alongside it. So Dane Rudhyar it's an odd name, isn't it? Because it's a sort of made-up name, and I'll go into a little bit about that. His last name is kind of kludged together from Sanskrit words. But he was a French person who came to music at a young age because of an accident. He sort of dove into intellectual pursuits. And when he was a teenager, there's a legend that he would tell where he saw an image of swirling leaves, sort of autumn leaves, and he had this vision that life is cyclical, that worlds exist on cycles, they rise and they fall, and they're constantly being reinvented, and there's different kind of worlds that happen. I think it makes it apt to do this in autumn because we're seeing the going down of one season and eventually rising above another season. Rudhyar thought that Europe was a dying culture, that it was on its way down, and so he wanted to get to America as fast as possible because America to him represented a culture that was on the rise, and he wanted to be part of a great kind of energy. We may, with 100 years on from that, we may be seeing that America itself is going down and something else is on the rise, maybe China, I'm not really sure, but I'll try to enjoy this one while I can at least. So the music is not what this place does normally. It's fine. Not everything has to be for me specifically, but why am I here really? I'm always interested in artists and creative people who are trying to traverse as many disciplines as possible, who are as open to as many kinds of ways of thinking as they can. And Rudhyar is one of those special people who I think tried to do everything he possibly could as an artist, as a composer, as a painter, as a writer, and he had such a bold imagination and interior fire that he was able to dive into all these different things at once, sometimes in phases, but he kept everything going throughout his life. Astrology is something that he's really well known for in the circles of astrologers, but it's not what he started out as. He slid into it by going to New York and being exposed to a lot of Far Eastern philosophers, Zen philosophers, early theosophists. One of his best friends was Alice Bailey, who put out a book of his in the 1930s called The Astrology of Personality, which I've got here. This library has a lot of his astrological books, and there's a little section over there. This one, along with some others, is available in the bookstore. This particular book, there's a quote on the back from the early flyleaf: "The greatest step forward in astrology since the time of Ptolemy." So this, as you can see, is a pretty hefty book, so I am not sure I can make particular heads or tails out of it right now, but I can tell you some stuff about what his music is, how that relates into this. So any here know about what was going on in music in the early 20th century? Sort of vague idea. Well, what you should know is that it was exploding. The years in between the world wars, right before it, were this enormous hotbed of invention in classical music, what we're going to kind of hear. All sorts of people zooming around with different ideas about how to reform music into new ways of thinking, how to have new systems to replace the old, how to just blow all the rules out and just do whatever they wanted. So major names you've probably heard of, like Claude Debussy, Igor Stravinsky, all those others who were all competing with each other to have their thing be the one thing. And Rudhyar came into that through the New York scene. I mentioned in my thing, there's these people called the ultramodernists. You may have heard of a guy named Charles Ives. He was a major American composer. He became sort of an elder statesman to some of these people. A lot of ones who were not as famous as him, but they were just determined to get America in music into hard modernism and really find new paths of doing things. And he was very excited by this because he'd grown up in France, where there was a lot of stuff going on, but he came into contact with a few people who were just voraciously and tremendously original, and they didn't have a system that they were trying to put on other people. And that's a really important thing, because when people explore through the arts, they tend to want to fit themselves into a mold that's really familiar, in the same way, in the way that we may be exploring different spiritual paths. If we know something has been around for a long time, then we can try to slot ourselves into that as a way of going forward. But Rudhyar found that the method that was going to really invigorate the individual into finding some new path, that's what he wanted to do. And he developed his own style that I would say is visionary, is very physical, and it turns this instrument, the piano behind us, into what he called an orchestra of gongs. And so even if you've heard modern music before, you probably haven't heard this, because no one else wrote quite like this. This is a unique sound experience, not just for me to play, but for you to hear. And so I could keep talking about all the historical stuff, but I'd like to play a little bit, and then we'll go back into a little more chatter. So I'm going to start with probably his first really mature piece. He had a series of suites called tetragrams, which means it has 4 parts. And I'll start with the first tetragram written about 1920. So let's just dive right in. notes about his musical philosophy, I stumbled across a passage out of a book called Rhapsodies that he wrote when I think he was about in his early 20s. So one of the least known pieces of Rudhyar's art is poetry, and those books are mostly not listed, say in this. They were very small editions, and I would say that they're somewhat outside the poetic mainstream of his day. They're very devotional poems in free verse. And the first book he published in Canada in the 1910s, called Rhapsodies, and there's a great passage here that I think very emotionally shows what his music tried to do. There are no cosmic rhythms, no human rhythms. There are rhythms, neither cosmic music nor human music. Oh, why not the one music? Music, the smile of those who are killed. Let us dissolve into the one, infinite, eternal. Are these not the great lulling dreams which alone do not disappoint, dreams more real than individual reality, which breaks us like senseless puppets, to withdraw slowly from illusory senses, perpetual disappointment, to dissolve one's nerves in the earth as trees do, to become very large, impalpable, fluid, like blue water, the color of death, to glide into ecstasy, to the immense lullaby of the great rhythms. The rhythms took me and smiled upon me like mothers, and I am a great translucent veil which the wind cradles like all infinite things. So this is a kind of warm-up piece which I just did. The next piece is going to really encapsulate all of that. If you're wondering if astrology does loop into all of this, I would say there are a lot of great resources to understand his astrological position. With the astrology of personality, one of the biggest things was to loop in Jungian psychology into astrology. A problem that Rudhyar had with the practice of astrology was determinism, the idea that free will didn't really exist, that it was all decided for us by cosmic bodies. And he found through deep psychology a way to loop in free will and the potential of people to grow through astrology into this new system. And he started humanistic astrology or transpersonal astrology one way. Here's a good quote for this philosophy. Most essentially stated, my ultimate aim in reformulating astrology has not been to help people using or studying astrology feel secure by avoiding the unpredictable and traumatic. It has been to transform the search for a static kind of security by avoidance into a search for a dynamic kind of security that can be achieved only through understanding the place and meaning of the cathartic and transformative in human life. In order to do this, and in order to help astrologers not take for granted the exclusive validity of traditional formulas and aims, I have repeatedly asked the question, what is astrology for? And with artists and thinkers, they're constantly asking, what is any of this for to themselves? For me, what is music for? I read books a lot, what is that for? Why compose music? Why reiterate music to other people? And so I really think that that all of his astrological work harkens back to just an interior constant searching, and that makes his music as much a part of an aspect of his self-expression as any other part. One thing I can't cover in very much right now is his painting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next half, but it is as exciting as anything you're going to hear or read tonight. I'd like to continue playing with a piece called Granites. Granites is one of his best known pieces because it's the easiest of all of them to get a hold of. This particular edition also includes 3 paeans, which my hands are too small for me to play. But you see on the side here, there's New Music Edition. New Music Edition was one of the most important publications of modernist music in America in the 1920s and 30s, and this is probably his chief publication out of it. And Granites is one of his most visceral and exciting and clangorous at times, but still deeply resonant pieces. And it's probably going to push this piano to its limits. Somewhat, I can hear a rattling string around in there. But I will not be like Liszt and break the instruments. Those days are long gone. But it is special to play this. You wonder if Vero or Viral had heard it. Is it Viral? Did you hear his name?
Yeah,
Viral.
that's
Okay,
how I
that's
heard it.
really nice to know. Thank you. So John
Sure.
Viral, whether or not you played that, and we'll get back to that in the second half. So right now I'm going to play Granite's one of his best and best known pieces. After this, we'll take a little break. said, you know, whenever you see a piece performed, don't you imagine that it's just improvised on the spot? And I don't know if that holds true for all music, but this requires a very improvisational feel. You know, no two performances of this will be alike because the rhythms and the chords are almost impossible to get correct. So it requires you to go through it into your own space. So I hope we accomplish that tonight. We'll take a short break, and there's the bathrooms there and some tea there, and thank you so much for coming.
10 minutes?
Sure.
Yeah, age. Oh, I think it stood up there. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I'm really impressed.
Thank you again. Thanks for staying, and another thanks to the Theosophical Society for hosting this. This concert really came out of one piece that I wanted to do. Years ago, there was a man named Keith Johnson who had a sheet music shop in the basement of the building in Ballard. It was only open by appointment or random Saturdays. And he had some stuff from John Verrall's estate, including a couple of scores that he had written on himself. And one that he sold to me for a rather small amount of money, considering what it is this, Moments. Moments is not the preferred name of the pieces I'm about to play by Dane Rudhyar. I think the publisher probably insisted on that, though I don't know the history. The pieces that are inside of this he classified as pentagrams. So like the tetragrams had 4 pieces inside, and the pentagrams each have 5. This is pentagrams 1 through 3. These were written in the mid-1920s. And also represent some of his best known music, especially the Stars movement that we're going to get to later. Now, just finding this 1930 edition is exciting enough, but I was especially excited by something. If you see in that top right corner there, that is his signature. It's a gift edition that he gave to a man named John J. Becker. John J. Becker was one of the ultra-modernist composers that he knew in New York. He was alongside Ives and all that ilk. So this is a very, very special copy of this rare piece. I'm not sure how Verrall got a hold of this, but considering his long-time association with Theosophy, I'm guessing that it came through the Theosophical channel, and so maybe some more research with Verrall's family or otherwise who can turn up some really cool things. But right now we do have just the work. I wanted to talk a little bit more about his poetry and painting before I start this, because it allows me to show another great artifact. So in 1938, Rudhyar went to Santa Fe, and New Mexico has a long time been a hotbed for alternative thinking and occult interest and all that. And there was in Santa Fe a group of transcendental painters, transcendental artists, and that was the beginning of him painting. And in you can't really see it here, but if you go to Chaldea.com, they have a good archive of his paintings that he made. They're very abstract, and they consider him sort of a forerunner of the mid-20th century of sort of visionary painting. While he was in New Mexico, though, he published the 3rd and final book of his poetry, and I happen to have a copy of that with me, called White Thunder. This was in an edition of 400, made at the private press, the fine press of Hazel Dryce, in 1938. And I was very fortunate to find this at Powell's Books for, I think, $10. I was like, oh, that's really cool. If I could get a hold of Rhapsodies or Toward Man, the 1921, I would really like to get a hold of those. But this, I think White Thunder has been reprinted. A few people know about it. This copy also comes with another gift inscription to Helen, whose soul is a chalice opening to the downpour of white thunder. Which is a nice sentiment. This book has another bit out of it that I think is appropriate to start what we're going to do here. If you're interested more in how Rudhyar composed and what he was thinking of when he composed, on the back of the program I include this introductory note that is from this edition. And this lays out his whole piano philosophy very nicely. Like everything he wrote, it has maybe more words than it needs to, but he's such a big intellect that I think it's afforded for him. Another nice thing about this book is that it has a reproduction of one of his paintings, which is very cool. If you want to look at this afterward, I'm really happy to show this to you. These, as I said before, are what I would call free verse devotional poems, devotional to, not to the Christian God, but sometimes there are Christian figures or Eastern figures, but a lot of it is devotional to his sort of personal astrological spirituality. And again, as such, it's somewhat out of step with what we would think of as poetry at the time, but it does have its own special niche. If anyone here is familiar with Thelema, Aleister Crowley's religion, this reminds me a lot of the book by Frederick Hod, who was a Chicago Thelema person who wrote like 35 hymns to the goddess. So there is another way to fit this into occult study. So the very first thing in this book, and I was flipping back and forth through this trying to figure out what would be the most appropriate, but I think the best way to introduce moments, the first 3 pentagrams, is just to have the setup to this book. Black thunder rolls mightily, shredded by the livid spears of drunken gods of fury. Black thunder swoops down upon jagged peaks, crumbling wildly through mountain canyons, furrowing with fire prairies and meadows, glad to spread terror amidst the pale face. Black thunder gurgles elemental laughter to shock the virgin earth into submission, and maybe fulfill the ritual of the spear, and fields may grow roots and vivid progeny to appease the hunger of God-haunted man. White thunder is a paean of deliverance from the stale boundaries of 2 conscious sins mated in murky wars with 2 tepid virtues. It is a song of life, fervidly surging from unconscious springs of the eternal sea. White thunder is an epic of joy to stir heroic souls into power and wrench from them fire to burn themselves, phoenix, into immortality. White thunder, it is the you, it is the I that are free. You and I singing, dancing, God-torn, ecstatic, mighty lightnings. So without further delay, here's Moments. It's probably the first time anyone's performed it out of the score in a really long time, so it's a real privilege to bring it back with the Theosophical Society of Seattle and in this very special space. As you can see, this is a little falling apart, but I'll be gentle. so much for coming.